Now on the APEC VIP hotline, cutting-edge training for the serious athlete, apecgo.com. Joining us now, the Big 12 insider from RattleandHumSports.com, Kevin Lonnquist. How you doing, Kevin?
Good, Brian. How are you doing today?
Doing very well. Thank you very much for being with us. We have the football season over with until the bowls get kicked in, but boy, all the coaching carousel has really started to spin last weekend with the Tommy Tuberville's actions. What do you make about all of this?
Well, you know what, as far as the Tuberville stuff is concerned, it obviously doesn't portray him in a very good light when it's reported that he was at a dinner on Friday night with the recruits that were there, and then all of a sudden never comes back from dinner, and then winds up in Cincinnati hours overnight, basically, and then he's introduced and decides to tell Kirby Hocutt, their athletic director, that he is resigning and that he's going to take the job at Cincinnati. Yeah, obviously from Tommy's standpoint, he could have handled that a lot better, but I also understand, too, that I think what the actions demonstrate is that it was a very strained relationship between Tuberville and Tech. I think it was a marriage of convenience between the two because Tuberville, at the time when he was hired, didn't have a coaching job, wanted to get back into the coaching industry, and Tech was kind of in a lurch because of the fact that when it fired Mike Leach, and it was still trying to figure itself out, what they wanted to do, that they all kind of looked at each other and said, we need each other. But at the same time, I also think, too, that with Tommy being there, like I said, it was just never going to work from everyone being on the same page standpoint. And really, and that's disappointing, but at the same time, I think when you are the guy that follows the popular figure like Mike Leach was, and it doesn't matter, in my opinion, if it was Nick Saban or if it was Brian Kelly or Mac Brown or whatever, that I think that guy was always going to have a problem rallying and uniting the fan base, and I think that's part of what happened here. So there was probably a good faction of Tech fans that weren't going to give him a chance, regardless of how successful he was going to be, and there were those who were just ready to, then there were those who were anti-Leach that wanted something anybody but Leach, and so you just had a fractured community there, and I think now with Tuberville there gone and Kliff Kingsbury coming on board, that you've got the uniter there, the guy that everybody can agree on, the popular hometown son who loves to be there, he gets his first crack at a coaching job, and then we'll just see where it goes from there.
It just looked like it was destined to fail from the start, didn't it, for Tuberville? Well,
sure, and I had written in the summer that, of course, Tech missed a bowl game appearance last year. They went 5-7 and really crumbled in November, which is what they did again this year. Remember, they lost 4 out of their last 5. They were 6-1 at one point this year, Brian, and then the wheels came off. They were coming off that high-flying win over TCU in triple overtime, and then when they got smoked at Kansas State, that's when the things really started to come apart on them. And so there was a lot of heat on Tommy this year to get the program to a bowl this year, because there was speculation that if they did not make it to a bowl, that he was going to get dismissed. So I think you can kind of paint this in the picture of that it was always going to be this one-year thing with Tommy, that, the expectations are you better do this or your job's on the line. Mm-hmm. And I think when Tommy looked at that and said, you know what, even if I have an average season next year, or if we make a bowl and we're 6-6, that still may not be good enough. So let me get ahead of the wolf pack and get out of here. And of course, with him being with Whit Adcock, the AD at Cincinnati, where they have a history with each other at Cincinnati, or excuse me, at Auburn, that made sense. That's probably why he looked at it and said, I better go right now before I let this thing drift any further.
It really, at the time, made the Tech job look pretty bad, because, here he is leaving the Big 12 to go to the Big East, the crumbling Big East, mm-hmm. And a situation at Cincinnati where the facilities are not great. It's a stepping stone job, and yet you dump that dump the Big 12 for that. It didn't look real good for Tech at the point.
No, it didn't, and there was a lot of, and it caught everybody over in Lubbock off guard. No one saw this coming up until it started to break around, I think it was 10, 11 o'clock in the morning last Saturday when this all started to come down. I got a text message from somebody about 11:30 saying, Tuberville to Cincinnati, and I was going, you're kidding. But again, if I'm saying that here in Fort Worth, and the people in Lubbock were probably just an hour ahead of us when all that happened. And so, you can compare the jobs and say that the Tech job is better than the Cincinnati job because of the fact that it is in a BCS conference. and that sort of thing. And there's going to be more financial resources, better facilities. In fact, I think the Tech Board of Regents just met yesterday to approve about $5 to $6 million of upgrades to Jones Stadium. So you're going to see the commitment there. Again, I just think this was a situation, as I mentioned a moment ago, where it was a very strained relationship, and this is probably best for all parties. As ugly as it ended, it was probably best for both sides that it did end.
How do you think Kingsbury's going to do as a head coach? The guy's awfully young and very inexperienced.
Yeah, it is. He is, but he's very self-confident in his abilities. You know, he did a great job working with the A&M offense this year. Obviously, a lot of people will, you know, the debates will differ as to, well, this is Kevin Sumlin's offense, and Kingsbury's just kind of making sure that he's managing the bus the right way, and that he's not getting in the way and disrupting anything. And he has a great quarterback in Johnny Manziel. You know, I think from the standpoint that, but I think that might be giving too little a credit as far as, you know, Kliff's ability. I mean, he helped, you know, he and someone were tied at the hip when they were both at Houston. So I think that it's going to be one of those things where Kliff is going to have to surround himself with some experience on the staff. He's going to have a new quarterback to work with Michael Brewer, who was backing up Seth Dagey, and Seth is going to, you know, Seth's playing his final game in the Meineke Car Care Bowl in a couple of weeks. But then it's going to be Brewer, who threw about 47 passes, most of those in mop-up duty. So there's going to be a lot of work between him. And then I think the other thing that's going to be interesting to see what happens is what he does with the defensive side of the ball. Because remember, Tech has gone through 4 defensive coordinators in as many years, and the latest being Art Kaufman, where, you know, Tech was better this year defensively, but as we talked about on your show, Brian, that they really suffered in terms of collecting sacks and also collecting turnovers. Tech was last in the Big 12 in turnover ratio, and they were really far down the list as far as sacks were concerned. So I think Kliff's going to have to evaluate this and see, does he want to continue with Art and then maybe try and tweak some things, or does he want to bring his own people? I think those are situations that are going to remain to be seen, and you're probably going to have to wait till the end of the bowl season before that really happens. And he might have some people in mind already, and everything's being quiet, but because Tech still has 2 weeks to go for the game, but they're going to just keep the current coaching staff intact unless there's just a mass exodus right now. Remember, Neil Brown, the offensive coordinator, just left to go to Kentucky. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
And then there's Texas and Bryan Harsin moving on, taking the Arkansas State job. And I read a really interesting article yesterday that it made it sound like Harsin was kind of fed up with the culture at Texas as much as anything, but because he's more of a, I don't, you know, for a lack of a better comparison, maybe a Nick Saban type, likes to stay on his guys, coach them up, create a little bit of tension. Mac likes to pat him on the head and, you know, pump him up, and it just didn't seem like it was a good fit.
No, that's what you kind of get, and that's why you see the offense for Texas being so radically inconsistent this year. You know, it's a great opportunity for Brian. You want to, as a coordinator at a BCS school, you want that opportunity. I mean, look what happened with Gus Malzahn, who was the offensive coordinator at Auburn, got the 1 year of season experience running the Arkansas State program, had a great year, and then he comes back to run Auburn. So, I mean, for any coordinator at the BCS level who wants to break into head coaching ranks, this is a great opportunity for him. I mean, the Red Wolves are a good program. They've been pretty consistent the last couple of years. There's been a run of really good talent going through there. So I think Harsin will be, you know, he'll have a good run there and be successful and kind of work his way up the food chain, if you will. You know, and getting back to the issue with Texas and the comfort level there, you know, this is stuff, again, that, you know, that the complaints against the Texas program have is that they coddle their kids, that they baby them too much, and they don't challenge them enough. And this is why when Texas has played a lot of stand-up games under Mac, minus the national championship game against USC with Vince Young, that Texas has really folded in a lot of those big games. I mean, you look at the OU game this year, they got blown out again. You look at the way they played against TCU and Kansas State, that they just did not make plays. They weren't consistent. And you just didn't see coaches getting in kids' faces. And I don't have a problem with that, by the way. I think that kids need to be challenged. You'd be surprised, by the way, at how many kids want to be challenged instead of being babied.
Absolutely.
Now, I think there is this perception nationally, because of the environment that we live in, that kids have never been told no, so that the first moment of confrontation in their lives, they're going to fold. I don't buy that. I mean, I understand that, and I do see that it's out there. But if you don't challenge people, and it doesn't matter if it's football or any walk of life, Bryan, that if you don't challenge people, you don't know what they're capable of doing, but more importantly, neither do they unless they're challenged.
Absolutely.
And I think that from the standpoint from, his and that's why Nick Saban is so successful, is because, he may be viewed as a pariah in a lot of circles, maybe on his own team, but he has the history to back it up because he challenges his kids, and his kids will play at a high level. I mean, Alabama survived that SEC championship game against Georgia because those kids found a way to deal with adversity, and it speaks for itself.
I totally agree with you. It's the old argument between spanking your children or putting them in timeout. I'm all for spanking. I'm all for spanking. All right. You are an SMU guy. You see the Big East doing what it's doing right now. You got 7 schools getting ready to pull out. They're mostly basketball schools. Right. But it looks like that's almost a done deal. They're going to meet one more time tomorrow and probably finalize it. And it's mostly those schools up in the East where the Big East was.
Right.
So what's the future of SMU now, having them getting ready to move into a conference that's really going to be nothing like what they joined?
Obviously there's a lot of uncertainty. I know that the president of the university, Dr. Turner, issued a statement saying that they're still committed to the Big East, but obviously it's not what you say publicly that where the works are done or where all the business is done, but it's what you do behind the scenes. And I think that's probably a good way that SMU has to play it. I think from their standpoint that all those folks that are moving in, be it SMU, Houston, Central Florida, and obviously Boise State and San Diego State, that they have to look at it from their standpoint of that, do we want to make chicken salad out of chicken soup now? And does it really make sense to remain in the Big East? And really, there's a lot of things in parts here because you got the television contract that still hasn't been negotiated successfully by Mike Oresco, the commissioner of the Big East. That seems to be treading a lot of water. So, I mean, obviously SMU and probably those folks like Houston and Central Florida will find a way to form either a new version of the Big East. They kind of have to stick together because they really don't have anywhere to go. They have to form their own version of the Big East or just, reform or form something new. Yeah, it hurts, and it's probably not what they want to do. And obviously, without a successful negotiation of a television deal, it does impact how much revenue that the schools are going to generate from this. And so there's going to be a lot of questions. And then if you do reform, what kind of bowl affiliations can you get tied into? That's going to be another thing that they're going to have to look at as far as how they do this. I think for now, what you don't want to do is make any panic moves or panic statements. I think what the leadership over there will probably do is just evaluate this as discerningly as they possibly can. I'm sure that Dr. Turner and the new athletic director, Rick Hart, are obviously in discussions with not only the Big East leadership, but obviously other conference schools to decide what are our options here. And I think the one thing that they don't want to do is do something too rash and say we need to fold it. They just need to look at the landscape and see what happens should the basketball schools officially pull out and then go from there. I know some fans are very concerned about, what does this mean for the basketball program and Larry Brown, because Larry just got here and he said that one of the reasons why he took the job at SMU was because the fact that the school is joining the Big East. Well, obviously it's not going to be the Big East that he was talking about when he was hired in April. But I think the one thing but I don't have a big concern about that as far as Larry's tenure there. I think a lot of people still look at Larry's tenure at SMU as being maybe 2-3 years max.
Right.
And then just kind of moving and then turning the program over to Tim Jankovich, who's kind of like the head coach in waiting. And, if SMU is really serious about wanting to get the basketball program on its own footing, I mean, you can be a Gonzaga, you can be a Butler, or you can make your own way in the world of basketball, create a good product, and show the basketball kids across the country, and as well as the AAU programs, that you're serious. You've got a $40 million renovated facility because Moody Coliseum over there is going through a renovation and should be ready by by December of next year. About this time next year, it should be ready. And I think that program will be in pretty good shape. As for football, hard to know where that's going to go as far as, June Jones' tenure there. Looks like he'll be back next year, and then just trying to recruit to the best of your ability. I've always maintained, Bryan, that I've never really gotten caught up with the conference affiliation side of things, my only thing for SMU is just try to be the best that you can every day, win, and let your resume speak for itself. And that's where SMU really needs to focus on. Yeah, the conference thing is kind of overshadowing everything, but that's the thing that SMU needs to be doing is be competitive. If that's the direction they really want to go, of course, is be competitive, try and win, compete for conference championships, and as you build that resume, then there will be an absolute reason why you could be picked up by a big conference if it's not the Big East in 4 or 5 years.
Good stuff, Kevin. Hey, thanks very much for coming on with us today. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem, Bryan. You have a great weekend.
You do too, buddy. Thank you very much. Kevin Lonnquist, the Big 12 Insider, on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM. Kevin, of course, from Rattle and Hum Sports. Thank you, Kevin.